I'm Aria, 34 years old, and I never thought I'd be grateful for my husband's betrayal. That morning started like any other Saturday in our Denver home, with me making breakfast for our two kids, while my husband was supposedly at a medical conference in Vegas. Then came the text that changed everything. Not just because he'd married my younger sister while drunk in Vegas, but because it finally freed me from a marriage I'd been too scared to leave. Before I continue this wild story, let me ask, where are you watching from today? Please hit like and subscribe if you've ever had someone underestimate just how strong you really are. Looking back now, I realize the signs were everywhere, scattered throughout our 12 years of marriage like breadcrumbs, leading to this moment. Marcus and I met at the University of Colorado during our senior year. He was studying business, already talking about his big plans to conquer the pharmaceutical sales world, while I was finishing my degree in graphic design, dreaming of creating beautiful things that made people smile. Our romance felt like something out of a movie at first. Marcus pursued me with the kind of intensity that made me feel like I was the only woman in the world. Coffee dates turned into long walks through Boulder Creek, discussing our dreams and aspirations. He'd show up at my apartment with wildflowers he'd picked on his morning runs, and I'd design little cards for him with inside jokes that made him laugh. Within 6 months, he proposed at Chautauqua Park during sunset, with the Flatirons glowing orange behind us. I said yes without hesitation, convinced I'd found my soulmate. We got married the following spring, a beautiful ceremony at a vineyard in Palisade. My younger sister Chloe, then just 16, was my maid of honor, complaining the whole time about her dress not being trendy enough for photos. Even then, she had dreams of being famous, constantly taking pictures and talking about moving to Los Angeles to become an actress or model. Our parents indulged her every whim, buying her the latest phones and cameras, funding her various pursuits, while telling me I was the responsible one, who didn't need their help. The early years of marriage seemed perfect on the surface. Marcus landed his dream job with a major pharmaceutical company, and I started building my freelance design business while we tried for children. When Emma arrived, followed by Noah 2 years later, I made the decision to scale back my work to part-time. Marcus said it made sense financially that his salary could support us while I focused on raising our children. I agreed, not realizing I was beginning to disappear piece by piece. We bought a 4-bedroom house in Highlands Ranch, a suburban paradise with excellent schools and neighbors who organized block parties every summer. Marcus joined the country club, started golfing with executives and doctors, coming home with stories about deals made on the ninth hole. His work trips increased 2 or 3 times a month, always to exciting cities where conferences conveniently aligned with golf tournaments or wine tastings. The changes in Marcus were gradual, so subtle, I convinced myself I was imagining things. He started making comments about my appearance, suggesting I join a gym like his colleague's wife did. He'd scroll through his phone during dinner, barely listening when Emma talked about her school projects, or when Noah showed him his drawings. When I'd bring up feeling disconnected, he'd buy me flowers and promise a date night that would inevitably get canceled for a work emergency. Meanwhile, Chloe had grown into exactly what she'd always wanted to be, or at least what she thought she wanted. At 28, she'd accumulated over 200,000 Instagram followers, calling herself a lifestyle influencer. She'd moved back to Denver after failing to make it in Los Angeles, but she spun it as choosing to be closer to family. Every family gathering became a photo shoot opportunity for her with Marcus, often volunteering to take her pictures, joking that he had the steadiest hands. I started noticing things about 6 months ago. Marcus would laugh at his phone, and when I'd ask what was funny, he'd say it was just a work meme I wouldn't understand. Chloe started showing up at our house more often, always when she knew Marcus would be home wearing increasingly revealing outfits that she claimed were for content creation. They developed inside jokes I wasn't part of, references to conversations I hadn't witnessed. At Thanksgiving, I caught them in the garage during dinner preparations. They jumped apart when I entered Chloe, claiming she was helping Marcus find the extra folding chairs. But there were no chairs in the garage, and Marcus's face was flushed in a way that had nothing to do with moving furniture. When I confronted him later, he said I was being paranoid that therapy might help with my insecurity issues. I actually considered it, wondering if motherhood and isolation had made me see threats where none existed. The week before the Vegas conference, Marcus was different. He was almost giddy, packing his suitcase days in advance, trying on different outfits, and asking my opinion on which looked better. He mentioned several colleagues would be attending, rattling off names I'd heard before. He even kissed me goodbye properly for the first time in months when the Uber arrived to take him to the airport. That Friday night with the kids at my parents' house for their monthly sleepover, I threw myself into a big client project. I was redesigning an entire brand identity for a local restaurant chain, the kind of project that could restart my career properly if I nailed it. I worked until 3 in the morning, energized by the creative flow I'd missed for so long. I texted Marcus goodnight, noting he hadn't responded to my earlier messages asking how the conference was going. I figured he was networking schmoozing with important people doing what he did best. Saturday morning arrived quiet and peaceful. I made myself coffee in my favorite mug, the one Emma had painted for me in art class with wobbly hearts, and the word Mom in purple letters. I sat at the kitchen island, my laptop open to review the designs I'd created the night before. The morning sun streamed through the windows, casting geometric shadows across the marble countertop Marcus had insisted we needed for resale value. My phone buzzed at exactly 9:47. I almost didn't check it immediately, wanting to finish adjusting a logo element first. But something, maybe mother's intuition or just the universe preparing me, made me pick up the device. Marcus's name appeared on the screen with a message that would change everything, though not in the way he expected. The text message seemed to pulse on my screen, each word a deliberate dagger meant to destroy me. Just married your sister. You're pathetic. Been planning this for months. Below the words was a photo that looked like it belonged in a trashy reality show. Marcus and Chloe stood in front of a Vegas wedding chapel, the kind with neon signs and Elvis impersonators. They were both clearly drunk, holding up their left hands to display matching gold bands. Chloe wore a white mini dress that looked like it came from a Halloween store, while Marcus had his shirt half unbuttoned, his tie wrapped around his head like a fraternity boy at his first party. I stared at the image, waiting for my world to shatter, for the tears to come, for the rage to build. Instead, I felt my coffee mug slip from my hand in slow motion, watching as it fell to the floor and exploded into a dozen pieces, brown liquid spreading across the white tiles like a Rorschach test. My hands were shaking, but not from sadness or anger. It was something else entirely, something I couldn't quite name yet. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Chloe. Sorry, not sorry. He chose the better sister. You were never enough for him anyway. Time for you to face reality. She'd added a ring emoji and a champagne bottle, as if this was something to celebrate, as if destroying a family was worthy of digital confetti. Within minutes, my phone became a lightning storm of notifications. Chloe had already posted their wedding on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, every platform where she could squeeze attention from this moment. The caption read, "Sometimes love finds you in unexpected ways. Just married the love of my life. No regrets when it's real love." The comments started pouring in immediately. Some people were congratulating them, clearly not understanding the situation. Others who knew us were expressing shock, asking if this was some kind of joke. Then Marcus's mother called. I watched her name flash on the screen 5 times before I answered. Her voice was bubbling with excitement, not a trace of concern for me or her grandchildren. She gushed about how she'd always felt Chloe understood her better, how they shared similar interests in fashion and social events. She actually said she was relieved Marcus had found someone more suitable for his career trajectory. She asked if I could pack Marcus's things neatly so nothing would be wrinkled when he picked them up. I hung up without responding and looked at the mess of coffee and ceramic shards on my kitchen floor. Each piece reflected the morning light differently, creating tiny rainbows in the destruction. That's when I typed my response to Marcus. 1 word, 4 letters, cool. My phone immediately exploded with calls from him. I counted 15 attempts in 2 minutes. He started sending more texts, each one increasingly frantic. That's it, cool. Then, aren't you going to fight for our marriage? Followed by, say something else. And finally, this isn't like you, Aria. What's wrong with you? I set my phone aside and got paper towels to clean up the coffee. As I knelt on my kitchen floor mopping up the mess, I felt something shift inside me. It was like a door I hadn't known was locked suddenly swung open, revealing a room full of light. This wasn't devastation. This was liberation. My phone continued its symphony of notifications. Friends were texting, asking if I'd seen Chloe's posts, if I was okay if they should come over. My mother called 6 times. My father sent a single text. What has that girl done now? But I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I sat back at my laptop and started taking screenshots of everything. Every post, every comment, every text message. My hands were steady now, my mind crystal clear. The strange thing about being betrayed is that it often confirms what you already knew deep down. As I documented their public declarations, memories started clicking into place like puzzle pieces I'd been trying to force into the wrong spots. The receipt for lingerie I'd found in Marcus's jacket 3 months ago, which he claimed was a surprise for our anniversary that he'd forgotten to give me. The weekend conference in Chicago that got extended twice with Chloe, coincidentally visiting friends there at the same time. The phone calls Marcus took in his car sitting in our driveway for 20 minutes rather than coming inside. But there were other memories, two older ones I'd buried under years of trying to make things work. The way Marcus had systematically discouraged my friendships, always finding something wrong with anyone who got too close to me. How he'd convinced me to put the house solely in my name because of his credit issues from business school, which I now realized was actually strategic planning for this exact moment. The joint bank accounts he'd insisted on controlling because he was better with numbers, making me ask for money like a child requesting allowance. I remembered Emma asking me last month why Daddy was mean to me sometimes. I'd made excuses, said he was stressed from work, that adults sometimes spoke sharply when they were tired. But my 10-year-old daughter had looked at me with eyes far too wise and said, "You don't talk mean when you're tired, Mom. You just get quiet." Noah had added his own observation. "Dad smiles more when you're not in the room." From the mouths of babes came truth I'd been too afraid to acknowledge. My laptop screen filled with evidence of their betrayal. But all I could think about was freedom. No more walking on eggshells wondering what mood Marcus would be in when he got home. No more apologizing for things that weren't my fault. No more shrinking myself to fit into the narrow space he'd allocated for me in his life. No more pretending we were a happy family when my children could see the truth better than I could. I looked around my kitchen at the home I'd tried so hard to make perfect and realized it had been a beautiful prison. Every carefully chosen decoration, every meticulously organized cabinet, every spotless surface had been my attempt to control something in a life where I controlled nothing. But now, with coffee stains on my pajama pants and my marriage imploding on social media for everyone to see, I felt more in control than I had in years. The notification sound on my laptop chimed. It was an email from Marcus sent from his phone, probably because I wasn't answering his calls. The subject line read, "This doesn't have to be ugly." I almost laughed at the irony. He'd just married my sister in a drunken Vegas ceremony, announced it to the world with the grace of a frat boy, and now he was worried about things getting ugly. I opened the email. It was a masterpiece of manipulation and gaslighting. He wrote about how this was actually my fault for letting myself go after the kids were born, how I'd become boring, focused only on Emma and Noah instead of his needs. He said Chloe understood his ambitions, supported his dreams, made him feel alive again. He generously offered to give me the house if I agreed to a quick, quiet divorce, and didn't make things difficult with the children. He even suggested we could all be friends eventually, one big modern family. I moved his email to a folder I created called Evidence and continued my work. Outside, the Saturday morning continued as normal. I could hear the neighbor's lawnmower, the distant sound of children playing in the park down the street. The world hadn't stopped turning because Marcus had revealed his true nature. Life went on, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was actually part of it, instead of watching from behind glass. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Mom, can we come home early? Grandma is acting weird and keeps trying to take our phones." I smiled at my daughter's directness and responded, "Of course, sweetheart. I'll pick you up in an hour. We'll get ice cream on the way home." As I stood to get dressed, I caught my reflection in the microwave door. The woman looking back at me wasn't pathetic. She wasn't broken. She was a survivor who'd just been handed the key to her own jail cell. And she was about to show everyone exactly what happened when you underestimated a quiet woman who'd been documenting everything. The hour drive to my parents' house gave me time to call Lauren, my best friend since college, who'd become a successful divorce attorney. She answered on the second ring, her voice groggy from sleep, until I said, "Marcus married Chloe in Vegas last night." The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds before she transformed into the legal warrior who'd built a reputation for protecting women in high-conflict divorces. "Tell me you've been documenting everything," she said, and I could hear her moving around, probably heading to her home office. I gave her the highlights while navigating Saturday morning traffic, watching normal families heading to soccer games and farmers markets, while my life reorganized itself into something I didn't recognize yet, but already preferred. Lauren's advice was precise and cold as surgical steel. Don't react emotionally. Screenshot everything before they sober up and start deleting. Check your financial accounts immediately. Change your passwords on everything. And Aria, this is important, do not leave the house. In Colorado, that could be seen as abandonment. She promised to have separation papers drawn up by Monday and told me to start gathering financial documents. After we hung up, I pulled into my parents' driveway and sat for a moment preparing myself. Through the living room window, I could see my mother pacing while my father sat in his recliner, the newspaper forgotten in his lap. Emma and Noah were on the couch, looking confused and slightly worried. My mother had obviously been trying to extract information from them about their father's whereabouts. The moment I walked in, my mother rushed toward me, her face a mask of mortification and fury. "Aria, I'm so sorry. I can't believe Chloe would do this. We had no idea she was even in Vegas. She told us she was at a brand collaboration event in Aspen." Her hands fluttered around like wounded birds, not knowing whether to hug me or hold me at arm's length to assess the damage. My father stood slowly, his 70-year-old frame still imposing when he was angry. "That girl has gone too far this time," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "This is beyond selfish. This is cruel." He looked at me with eyes that suddenly seemed older. "What do you need us to do?" But I wasn't there for comfort or battle plans. I was there for my children. Emma ran to me first, wrapping her arms around my waist. "Mom, why is Aunt Chloe wearing a wedding dress in her pictures with Dad? Grandma took our phones, but we already saw it at breakfast." Noah joined us, his 8-year-old face scrunched in confusion. "Did Dad get married again? Can you do that?" I knelt down to their level, pulling them close. "Let's go home and I'll explain everything, okay? But first, ice cream is promised." They nodded, trusting me completely. And in that moment, I knew that whatever happened next, protecting their hearts and minds would be my North Star. The drive home was surprisingly peaceful. The kids told me about the pancakes Grandpa made them, how Grandma kept checking her phone, and gasping how their cousin texted them asking if their dad was really married to Aunt Chloe now. Emma, wise beyond her years, finally said, "Mom, if Dad married Aunt Chloe, that means he doesn't want to be married to you anymore, right?" I met her eyes in the rearview mirror and nodded. "That's right, sweetheart." Noah's response was pure 8-year-old logic. "Good, he made you sad a lot." Back home while the kids ate their ice cream at the kitchen island, I opened my laptop and began my investigation in earnest. First, the bank accounts. Marcus had already started moving money, transferring thousands from our joint savings to an account I couldn't access. But he'd made a crucial error. He didn't know about the inheritance from my grandmother, who'd passed 6 months ago, the money sitting in an account under my maiden name. $500,000, he couldn't touch, money I'd been planning to use for the kids' college funds, but now realized would be my liberation fund. Next, I called my friend Derek, a forensic accountant who'd helped me with some complex client billing a few years back. When I explained the situation, he offered to do some digging pro bono. "Men who betray their wives like this are usually betraying other people too," he said. Within an hour, he called back with gold. Marcus had been falsifying expense reports, claiming personal trips as business travel, submitting receipts for meetings that never happened. Derek estimated he'd defrauded his company of at least $50,000 over the past 2 years. The evidence kept mounting. In my search through Marcus's home office, I found credit card statements for cards I didn't know existed, showing massive gambling debts from online poker sites. There were receipts for jewelry I'd never received, hotel stays in town. When he was supposedly out of town, dinner bills for restaurants he claimed to hate. The man I'd been married to was a stranger, a carefully constructed fiction designed to hide someone capable of extraordinary deception. But the most damaging discovery came from an unlikely source, Marcus's cloud storage, that still synced to our shared family computer. He'd forgotten to disconnect it. And there, in a folder marked Insurance Docs, were hundreds of emails between him and Chloe dating back 8 months. Their plan was laid out in excruciating detail. They would marry quickly in Vegas, then return and claim I'd been emotionally abusive using edited text messages and fabricated incidents to build a case for full custody and alimony. One email from Chloe made my blood run cold. She's always been the golden child, even though mom and dad favor me. Time to show everyone that perfect Aria isn't so perfect. Plus, you deserve someone who actually appreciates you, babe. Once we get the kids in the house, we can build the life you should have had from the start. Marcus's response was equally revealing. The kids will adjust. They're young enough to forget this drama. And once your influencer career takes off with my connections, we'll be the power couple this town needs. Aria can go back to her sad little design projects. I screenshot everything, organizing it into folders labeled with the kind of precision Marcus always mocked me for: financial fraud, adultery evidence, conspiracy to commit fraud, child custody documentation. Each folder grew thick with evidence of their cruelty and stupidity. Lauren called back as I was working. Aria, I've been doing some research. Chloe has sponsorship deals with at least 12 major brands, all with morality clauses. If this story gets out the wrong way for her, she loses everything. And Marcus's company has a zero-tolerance policy for ethical violations. One call to HR with evidence of expense fraud, and he's done. I don't want to destroy them, I said, though even as the words left my mouth, I wondered if they were true. You're not destroying them, Lauren corrected. You're showing them the consequences of their choices. There's a difference. They constructed this bomb themselves. You're just choosing when it detonates. As evening approached, the kids settled in the living room with a movie seemingly unaffected by the day's revelations. I made their favorite dinner, mac and cheese with hot dogs cut up in it. The meal Marcus always said was too juvenile for his children. They ate happily, and for the first time in months, dinner was peaceful. No criticism about elbows on the table. No lectures about grades, no tense silence, while Marcus scrolled through his phone. My phone had been buzzing all day with messages I'd ignored, but as the kids got ready for bed, I finally started reading through them. Friends expressing shock and support, cousins taking sides, coworkers asking if I was okay. But one message stood out from Marcus's brother James. Just saw the news, I'm not surprised. He's been an ass for years. Let me know if you need anything. Team Aria all the way. That night, after tucking the kids in with extra hugs and promises that everything would be okay, I sat in my quiet kitchen with a glass of wine I actually wanted to drink, not one I was having to calm my nerves before Marcus came home. I looked at the evidence I'd compiled, the marriage I'd documented falling apart, and felt something I hadn't expected: excitement. Not for revenge, though that would come, but for the future that suddenly spread out before me, undefined and entirely mine. My phone lit up with one more text from Marcus. Why aren't you fighting for us? Don't you care at all? I typed back. Cool. Then I closed my laptop, finished my wine, and went to bed in the middle of the king-size mattress spreading out like a starfish for the first time in 12 years. Tomorrow, their world would start collapsing. Tonight, mine was finally beginning to expand. Sunday evening arrived with the kind of dramatic flair Chloe had always craved, though not in the way she'd imagined. I had spent the day with Emma and Noah at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, their favorite place deliberately staying off social media, while their father and aunt's Vegas escapade continued to explode across the internet. The kids were resilient, asking fewer questions than I'd expected, seeming almost relieved by the change in our family dynamic. We returned home just as Marcus's BMW pulled into our driveway, followed by Chloe's white Range Rover that she leased but pretended to own. I watched from the kitchen window as they got out, both wearing sunglasses, despite the evening light moving with the careful precision of the severely hungover. Marcus's usual confident stride was replaced with something tentative, while Chloe kept touching her hair and adjusting her clothes, preparing for a confrontation she'd probably been rehearsing all day. I sent the kids upstairs to play in the playroom, then walked to the front door, opening it before they could knock. The separation papers Lauren had expedited were in my hand, crisp and official. Marcus's face went through a series of expressions, like a bad actor cycling through emotions: surprise, confusion, anger, and finally a patronizing smile that I'd seen too many times before. Aria, we need to talk about this like adults. He began, using his sales voice, the one that had charmed countless doctors into prescribing his company's medications. Chloe stood behind him, trying to look confident, but failing to hide her nervousness. She'd changed into what she probably thought was a power outfit, designer jeans and a blazer, her new wedding ring catching the porch light. "Come in," I said pleasantly, stepping aside. "I made coffee. We should definitely talk." They exchanged glances, clearly not expecting civility. In the living room, I'd arranged everything perfectly. 3 cups of coffee on the coffee table chairs, positioned for a business meeting, rather than a family discussion. I sat first, crossing my legs and picking up my mug, the picture of calm control. Marcus launched into his prepared speech immediately. "Look, I know this looks bad, but you have to understand Chloe and I have a connection that just happened. We didn't mean for it to go this far. The Vegas thing was impulsive, probably not even legal, since we're still technically married." "Actually," I interrupted, sliding the separation papers across the table, "I've already filed for divorce, emergency filing based on abandonment and adultery. Colorado is interesting that way. Your marriage to Chloe might actually be void, but that's your problem to sort out." Chloe finally spoke, her influencer voice pitched higher than normal. "Aria, sister to sister, you have to know I never meant to hurt you. Love just happens sometimes. You and Marcus were basically roommates anyway. Everyone could see it." I smiled at her, the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Sister to sister. That's interesting, Chloe. Tell me, which part of planning this for 8 months was the spontaneous love part? Was it when you were discussing how to fake evidence of my emotional abuse? Or when you were calculating how to get custody of my children?" The color drained from both their faces simultaneously. Marcus's hand twitched toward his phone, probably wondering if I'd hacked his accounts. I pulled out my phone and showed them a screenshot of one of their emails, watching their eyes widen in recognition. "How did you—" Marcus started, then stopped, his business mind already calculating the damage. "You forgot to disconnect your cloud storage from the family computer," I said simply. 8 months of emails, Marcus. Every detail of your plan, including the parts about destroying my reputation and taking my children." Chloe's composure cracked first. "You can't use those. That's private correspondence. It's illegal." Her voice had gone shrill, all pretense of sisterly concern evaporating. "Actually, it's marital property accessible from a shared device," I said, taking another sip of coffee. "Lauren, my attorney, was very clear about that. She was also clear about something else. Chloe, do you know what morality clauses are?" My sister's face went from pale to ashen. Her hand started shaking, making her wedding ring catch the light erratically. She knew exactly what morality clauses were. Every sponsorship deal she'd signed had one. "And Marcus," I continued, turning to my soon-to-be ex-husband, "Derek found some interesting discrepancies in your expense reports. $50,000 worth of discrepancies. Your company has that zero-tolerance policy, doesn't it?" Marcus stood abruptly, his coffee untouched. "You're threatening us after everything I've done for you. I gave you this life, this house, these opportunities. You gave me—" I laughed, and it felt good, like stretching muscles that had been cramped for years. "I put the down payment on this house with my savings. It's in my name, only remember." "You insisted on that for tax purposes. The opportunities, I had a thriving design business before you convinced me to scale back. Everything you gave me was actually mine to begin with." Chloe's phone started ringing incessantly. She looked at the screen and gasped. "It's my manager, and my biggest sponsor, and— oh God, they're all calling." The reality of her situation was sinking in. Her entire career, built on portraying a perfect lifestyle, was crumbling because she'd broadcast her betrayal to the world. "You should probably answer those," I suggested helpfully. "Though I imagine they're all saying similar things. Something about contract violations and terminated partnerships." Marcus pulled out his own phone, which had been buzzing nonstop. His face went through another series of expressions as he read message after message. I knew what he was seeing: HR requesting an emergency meeting, colleagues distancing themselves, his professional reputation dissolving in real time. "This is all your fault," he shouted, pointing at me with a shaking finger. "If you'd been a better wife, if you'd maintained yourself, if you'd supported my career properly, none of this would have happened." Emma's voice came from the stairs. "Don't yell at our mom." Both children were standing there, having snuck down despite my instructions. Noah was holding his sister's hand, his small face set in determination. "Kids, go back upstairs," I said gently. "Daddy was just leaving. We're not going anywhere until we sort this out." Marcus said, but his voice had lost its authority. I stood moving between him and the children. Actually, you are. The separation papers include a temporary restraining order. You come near this house again without permission and I call the police. You can coordinate visitation through Lauren once you've found somewhere to live. Your mother's house, perhaps. I'm sure she'll be thrilled to have you back. Chloe was crying now, mascara running in black rivers down her cheeks. Mom and Dad won't even answer my calls. This wasn't supposed to happen like this. How was it supposed to happen? I asked, genuinely curious. Was I supposed to collapse, beg fight for a man who'd been planning to destroy me? Did you think I'd just disappear quietly while you played house with my life? Marcus grabbed Chloe's arm, pulling her toward the door. Come on, we'll figure this out. I know people, we can spin this. But as they reached the door, his phone rang with a distinctive ringtone, his boss. He answered with false bravado that crumbled within seconds. I couldn't hear the other side, but Marcus's responses told the story. Yes, sir, I understand, sir. Tomorrow morning. Yes, I'll bring everything. When he hung up, he looked at me with pure hatred. You've destroyed everything. No, I said quietly. You destroyed everything. I just documented it. They left without another word, their expensive cars pulling away from my house for what I knew would be the last time. I closed the door and turned to find Emma and Noah standing at the bottom of the stairs. Mom, Emma said carefully, are you okay? I knelt down and pulled them both into a hug. You know what I'm better than okay. I'm free. Noah pulled back to look at my face. Does this mean no more yelling at dinner? No more yelling at dinner, I confirmed. And no more pretending to be happy when we're not, Emma added, proving once again that children see everything. No more pretending, I agreed. From now on, we're going to be real, and we're going to be happy. Actually happy. Later that evening, after the kids were in bed, I sat on my back porch with my laptop watching the digital destruction of Marcus and Chloe's lives unfold in real time. Chloe's Instagram followers were dropping by the thousands. The comments on her posts had turned vicious, calling her a homewrecker, a narcissist, a fake. Brands were publicly disassociating from her posting statements about not condoning behavior that violated family values. Marcus's LinkedIn profile, which he'd always maintained with obsessive care, was being flooded with reactions to the news. Former colleagues were sharing stories about his inappropriate behavior at conferences. One woman posted about how he'd propositioned her at a sales meeting, not knowing she was recording the conversation for training purposes. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. We're completely disgusted with Chloe. Your father has cut her off financially. She's no longer welcome in our home until she makes this right, which we know she never will. We're sorry we didn't see who she really was. You and the children are all that matter now. It was strange receiving the support and validation I'd always craved from my parents, though it came at such a cost. But as I sat in the cooling Denver evening, listening to the distant sounds of normal suburban life continuing around me, I realized the cost had already been paid. I'd been paying it for years in small installments of self-doubt, diminished dreams, and swallowed pride. My laptop chimed with an email from a potential client, someone who'd seen my portfolio online and wanted to discuss a major project. They mentioned being impressed by my work and my professional handling of a difficult personal situation. The business world, it seemed, appreciated strength and dignity over drama. As midnight approached, I did one final check of the chaos. Marcus had tried to post his side of the story on Facebook, a rambling narrative about being trapped in a loveless marriage and finding true connection with someone who understood him. The post had backfired spectacularly, with even his own friends calling out the inconsistencies and cruelty of his actions. Chloe had gone silent on all platforms after posting a tearful video begging people to understand that you can't help who you fall in love with. The video had been screen recorded and was being turned into memes mocking her fake tears and designer blazer. The internet, cruel as it could be, had chosen a side and it wasn't theirs. I closed my laptop and stood stretching muscles that felt looser than they had in years. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, explaining things to extended family, dealing with the legal proceedings, helping the children adjust to their new reality. But tonight, in my quiet house with my children safe in their beds and my future spreading out before me like an unmarked map, I felt something I hadn't experienced in over a decade: genuine optimism. My phone lit up with one last message from Marcus. "This isn't over. I'll fight you on everything. The house, the kids, all of it." I typed back my new favorite response: "Cool." Then I turned off my phone, went inside my actual house that was mine alone, and locked the door behind me. Tomorrow, their complete destruction would continue. Tonight, my reconstruction had already begun. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline Denver sunshine that made the mountains look close enough to touch, though the beauty was lost on Marcus as he sat in his company's HR conference room, watching his career implode in high definition. I knew this because his assistant, who'd always been kind to me at company parties, texted me updates in real time, a small act of solidarity from one woman to another. The HR director had printed out everything the forensic accounting report Derek had provided, showing $50,000 in fraudulent expenses. The emails between Marcus and Chloe discussing company resources they'd use for personal gain, even screenshots from social media, showing him at casinos when he was supposedly at medical conferences. The pharmaceutical industry was small, and gossip traveled fast. By noon, everyone would know that Marcus Thompson, the golden boy of regional sales, was nothing but a common thief and an adulterer. While Marcus was getting fired, Chloe was experiencing her own professional apocalypse. Her manager had called an emergency meeting at a coffee shop downtown, refusing to meet at Chloe's apartment because, as she told Chloe, she didn't want to be associated with her anymore. I knew about this meeting because Chloe in desperation had texted me begging me to call off the dogs, as if I controlled the internet's rage or her sponsor's decisions. I didn't respond. Instead, I was at my dining room table with Lauren going through the divorce paperwork, while Emma and Noah were at school. Lauren had brought reinforcements: a financial advisor, a child psychologist who specialized in high-conflict divorces, and a media consultant who'd reached out offering pro bono services because she'd been through something similar and wanted to help. The financial picture was actually better than I'd expected. The house was mine free and clear, except for a small mortgage in my name. The inheritance from my grandmother remained untouched in my separate account. Marcus's retirement accounts would be split, though his debts would reduce his share significantly. The gambling debts alone totaled nearly $100,000, all in his name only. But the real victory was in the custody arrangement Lauren had crafted. Given the evidence of Marcus's fraud gambling addiction and the reckless Vegas marriage, she was confident we could get primary custody with supervised visitation only. The child psychologist had interviewed both kids separately and found them remarkably well-adjusted but clear about their preferences. They wanted to stay with me. Around 11, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Against my better judgment, I answered. It was Marcus's mother, her voice tight with barely controlled fury, though for once it wasn't directed at me. "Aria, I owe you an apology," she began, each word seemingly painful to speak. "I've just come from the bank. Marcus had been taking money from my account, small amounts I didn't notice. $20,000 over 2 years. He had my banking information from when I had surgery, and he offered to help with bills." I wanted to feel sympathy for her, but all I could muster was a tired recognition. "I'm sorry that happened to you, Patricia. I'm testifying on your behalf in the divorce," she continued. "Whatever you need. Those children deserve better than what my son has become. I don't know where I went wrong with him." After she hung up, I sat in my quiet house processing this latest revelation. Marcus hadn't just betrayed me. He'd stolen from his own mother. The mask he'd worn wasn't just for his wife, but for everyone who trusted him. Lauren's phone buzzed with an email. She read it and smiled a shark's grin that made me grateful she was on my side. "Marcus's lawyer wants to discuss settlement. Apparently, your husband just realized that fraud charges could mean jail time, not just job loss. He's ready to give you everything you want in exchange for not pursuing criminal charges." By afternoon, the story had made local news. "Local influencer loses sponsorships after marrying sister's husband" ran on several blogs. Someone had created a Reddit thread documenting the entire saga with screenshots, and it had thousands of comments. The court of public opinion had rendered its verdict: Marcus and Chloe were trash, and I was a queen for handling it with such grace. Chloe's influencer career officially died at 2:47 p.m. when her largest sponsor, a wellness brand that preached family values and authenticity, posted a statement: "We cannot continue our partnership with someone whose actions so fundamentally contradict our core values. We wish Chloe Henderson the best in her future endeavors, but will be seeking new brand ambassadors who better represent our commitment to integrity." The other sponsors followed like dominoes: the fitness app, the jewelry line, the sustainable fashion brand, the meal kit service, all of them cutting ties publicly and decisively. Her follower count, which had peaked at 230,000, plummeted to under 50,000 and continued falling. The girl who'd built her identity on public validation was watching it evaporate in real time. Marcus's professional death was quieter, but equally complete. After being escorted from the building with a cardboard box of personal items, he discovered that word had already spread throughout the industry. The pharmaceutical sales community in Denver wasn't large, and everyone talked. His phone, usually buzzing with deals and dinner invitations, went silent. His golf buddies from the country club sent a single group text uninviting him from their weekend game and removing him from the club's membership roster. That evening, as I was making dinner for the kids, listening to them laugh about something that happened at school, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Chloe standing on my porch, mascara stained, and holding a gas station coffee cup. She looked nothing like the polished influencer who'd posted about manifesting your best life just days ago. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. "What do you want, Chloe?" "I need you to fix this," she said, her voice hoarse from crying. "You have to tell them it's not true, that we were just joking, that it's all a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I laughed short and sharp. "Which part? The 8 months of planning, the secret credit cards, the plot to claim I was abusive?" "I'll leave Denver," she bargained desperately. "I'll move to another state, start over. Just tell the sponsors it was a mistake. You're my sister Aria. We're family." "We were family," I corrected. "Family doesn't do what you did. Family doesn't plan to steal your children. Family doesn't celebrate destroying your life on Instagram." She started sobbing, ugly crying that would have moved me once upon a time. "Marcus said you were weak, that you'd just accept it. He said you'd never fight back." "Marcus was wrong about a lot of things," I said simply, "including you. Did you really think a man who'd betray his wife and children would be loyal to you?" Her phone buzzed, and she looked at it reflexively. Her face crumpled further. "He's blocking me on everything. He says I ruined his life by posting about the wedding. He's blaming me for all of it." Of course he was. Marcus was incapable of taking responsibility for anything. I wondered how long it would take Chloe to realize she'd destroyed her life for a man who'd throw her under the bus at the first sign of trouble. "Go home, Chloe," I said, starting to close the door. "I don't have anywhere to go," she wailed. "Mom and Dad won't let me come home. My apartment requires proof of income for renewal. I have nothing." "You have exactly what you chose," I replied. "Cool wedding, though." I closed the door on her protests and returned to my kitchen, where Emma and Noah were setting the table without being asked. They'd been doing little things like that since Saturday, as if they understood that we were a team now, not subjects in Marcus's kingdom. As we ate dinner, talking about homework and plans for the weekend, my phone lit up with messages I ignored. The outside world and its drama could wait. Inside my home with my children safe and happy, we were building something new from the ashes of what Marcus and Chloe had burned down. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, I sat down at my computer and opened my design portfolio. 3 new client inquiries had come in, all referencing my strength and professionalism. Apparently, my story had resonated with other women who'd been underestimated. One potential client wrote, "I want to work with someone who understands that success is the best revenge." I smiled, opening a new project file. Marcus and Chloe thought they'd destroyed me, but they'd actually freed me to become who I was always meant to be. And that woman was just getting started. The 6 months that followed were a masterclass in karma consequence and personal evolution. By the time the divorce was finalized in late summer, the contrast between our trajectories was so stark, it could have been scripted for a morality play. I sat in the courthouse on that final day, wearing a simple but elegant dress I'd bought with my first big client payment, watching Marcus sign papers with a hand that shook slightly, whether from anger or his reported new drinking problem, I couldn't tell. He'd aged years in those 6 months. The golden boy salesman who once commanded rooms now worked the evening shift at a sporting goods store in Castle Rock, 40 minutes from Denver, where he hoped no one would recognize him. He'd moved back in with his mother, who'd installed security cameras in her home and required him to pay rent, treating him like the untrustworthy tenant he'd become. His BMW had been repossessed after he'd missed 3 payments, and he now drove his mother's 2008 Honda Civic to work a detail that shouldn't have mattered, but somehow perfectly encapsulated his fall from grace. The legal proceedings had been swift and decisive once Marcus realized the extent of evidence against him. Lauren had played the fraud card perfectly, letting his lawyer know that criminal charges were still an option if Marcus didn't cooperate fully. The final settlement gave me primary custody, with Marcus getting supervised visitation every other weekend, the house free and clear, and 70% of the marital assets after debts. The gambling debts remained his alone, a 6-figure anchor that would drag behind him for years. Chloe's descent had been even more public and pathetic. After burning through her savings in just 2 months, she'd tried to reinvent herself as a life coach, teaching people how to overcome adversity. The internet's response had been swift and merciless. Someone created a compilation video of all her posts about manifesting success and living authentically, contrasted with screenshots of her texts planning to destroy my life. It went viral, gaining 3 million views and effectively ending any chance of her rebuilding her online presence. She now worked as a receptionist at a dental office in Aurora, a job she'd gotten only because the dentist was a family friend who'd taken pity on her. She'd moved into a studio apartment with a roommate she'd found on Craigslist, a far cry from the luxury 2-bedroom she'd once used as a backdrop for her aspirational content. The designer clothes had been sold on consignment apps, the Range Rover returned to the dealership, the carefully curated life reduced to whatever fit in a shared 500-square-foot space. But their relationship, the great love that was worth destroying a family for, that had imploded fastest of all. Within 3 weeks of the Vegas wedding, they were fighting constantly, each blaming the other for their situation. Marcus accused Chloe of ruining his life by going public. Chloe fired back that his fraudulent behavior was the real problem. Their Vegas marriage had been annulled after my lawyer proved it was invalid due to Marcus's existing marriage, adding insult to injury when they had to pay legal fees for the proceedings. The final breakup had been spectacularly public, occurring in the parking lot of the unemployment office, where they'd apparently run into each other. Witnesses reported screaming thrown coffee, and Marcus actually calling the police on Chloe when she keyed the Honda Civic, not realizing it was his mother's car. The police report became public record, naturally adding another layer to their humiliation. Meanwhile, my life had bloomed in ways I'd never imagined possible. The graphic design business I'd nearly abandoned was now thriving beyond my wildest dreams. The viral nature of my story had brought unexpected opportunities with women-owned businesses, specifically seeking me out. I'd hired 2 junior designers and was considering opening an actual studio space downtown. Emma had flourished without the constant tension at home. Her art had always been good, but now it was extraordinary, winning a statewide competition for elementary students. Her teacher pulled me aside at a school event to tell me how much more confident and vocal Emma had become in class. "Whatever you're doing differently, keep doing it," she'd said. Noah had joined the soccer team and discovered he was actually quite good when someone was cheering for him, rather than critiquing his every move. He'd scored his first goal last week, and the pure joy on his face had made me cry happy tears. Marcus had been invited to the game but hadn't shown up, claiming a work conflict that we all knew was a lie. The shift in my relationship with my parents had been unexpected, but healing. My mother, freed from the exhausting job of managing Chloe's emotions and ego, had become the grandmother my children deserved. She picked them up from school twice a week, teaching Emma to knit and helping Noah with his multiplication tables. My father, who'd barely spoken 10 words to me in as many years now, called weekly to check in, his voice warm with the pride I'd always craved. "I failed you," he'd said one evening apropos of nothing. I was so focused on Chloe's noise that I missed your quiet strength. I'm sorry, Aria. You deserve better from us. The apology didn't erase the years of feeling invisible, but it was a start, a foundation to build something new. The most surprising development had been Marcus's mother, Patricia. She'd become an unexpected ally and friend, divorcing herself from her son's actions while embracing her role as grandmother. She'd testified on my behalf during the custody hearing, telling the judge about Marcus's theft from her accounts and his long history of lying. Afterward, she'd hugged me and whispered, "You saved those children. Don't ever doubt that." She now had a standing weekly dinner date with the kids and me bringing dessert and staying to help with homework. Last week, she'd brought photo albums from Marcus's childhood, pointing out early signs of his narcissism that she'd dismissed as confidence. "I enabled him," she'd admitted. "I made excuses for every cruel thing he did. I won't make that mistake with Emma and Noah." The professional victories kept coming. A tech startup had hired me to design their entire brand identity. A local magazine had featured me in their Women Warrior section, telling my story of rebuilding after betrayal. The article had been picked up nationally, leading to speaking invitations at women's conferences about resilience and professional growth. But it wasn't the public recognition that meant the most. It was the quiet moments, Emma crawling into my bed on Saturday mornings, with a book reading aloud in silly voices. Noah's hand in mine as we walked to the park, his nonstop chatter about everything and nothing. Family dinners where no one got criticized, where laughter came easily, where phones stayed in another room. The house itself had transformed too. I'd repainted Marcus's home office a sunny yellow, turning it into an art studio for Emma and me to share. His man cave became a cozy reading nook with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. The master bedroom, once dominated by his massive TV and sports memorabilia, was now a serene sanctuary in shades of sage and cream. Every change was a small act of reclamation, making the space truly ours. Dating wasn't even on my radar despite friends' attempts to set me up. I was too busy falling in love with my own life to worry about sharing it with someone else. For the first time since college, I was Aria, not Marcus's wife or anyone's partner, and I wanted to explore who that person could become. The universe seemed to have a sense of humor about the whole situation. Last week, I'd run into Marcus and Chloe separately at a Whole Foods, each looking miserable and alone. Marcus had been in the discount section carefully calculating prices on his phone. He'd seen me and started to approach, then noticed my designer handbag, my confident posture, the smile that came naturally now, and he'd turned away. Chloe had been at the coffee bar ordering a small black coffee, no longer able to afford the elaborate drinks she used to post about. She'd tried to hide behind her sunglasses, but I'd seen her watching me select expensive cheeses for a client dinner I was hosting. Our eyes met briefly, and I'd nodded a simple acknowledgement of her existence, nothing more. She'd practically run from the store. The truth was, I didn't hate them anymore. Hate required energy I preferred to invest elsewhere. They were living their consequences, trapped in prisons of their own making. Every day they woke up to the reality of what they'd thrown away for a fantasy that had lasted less time than a seasonal Netflix series. Marcus's latest attempt to modify the custody agreement had been laughed out of court when he'd claimed he needed more time with the kids, but couldn't explain why he'd missed 5 of his last 8 scheduled visits. The judge had actually reduced his visitation, noting that consistency was important for children, and Marcus had proven himself consistently inconsistent. Chloe had made one last desperate attempt to resurrect her influencer career by starting a podcast about redemption and second chances. It had lasted exactly 3 episodes before the negative reviews and callback to her betrayal made her quit. The internet had a long memory, and some bridges once burned couldn't be rebuilt no matter how many inspirational quotes you posted. As I sat in my backyard on a perfect Denver evening, watching Emma teach Noah to paint watercolors, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Marcus from what must have been a burner phone. "I made the biggest mistake of my life. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. Is there any chance we could talk about starting over?" I screenshot the message for my lawyer, then typed back the response that had become my signature cool. Then I blocked the number and returned to watching my children create art in the golden hour light. They were painting flowers bright and bold and unashamed, nothing like the careful, muted life we'd lived before. Emma looked up and caught my eye, smiling with her whole face paint on her nose and joy in her expression. "Mom, are you happy?" she asked suddenly, as if the thought had just occurred to her. I considered the question, thinking about the journey from that Saturday morning when my world had supposedly ended to this moment when it was fuller than ever. "You know what, sweetheart, I really am." Noah added his own observation. "Good, because we are too." And that more than any professional success or vindication was the real victory. Marcus and Chloe had thought they were taking everything from me, but they'd actually given me the push I needed to claim the life I deserved. They'd expected tears and begging, but got strategy and strength. They'd wanted to destroy me, but instead freed me to become who I was meant to be. The sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Inside the house, dinner was cooking in the crock pot. A new client proposal was waiting on my laptop. And tomorrow held promise instead of dread. Marcus and Chloe were out there somewhere, living their diminished lives, probably still blaming everyone but themselves. But here in my backyard with my children, surrounded by the life I'd built from the ashes of betrayal, I was exactly where I belonged. 1 year after that fateful Saturday morning text, I stood in my newly opened design studio in Denver's Rhino district, watching my team of 6 designers work on projects for clients across the country. The exposed brick walls were covered with our portfolio pieces, including the rebrand for a Fortune 500 company's diversity initiative that had put us on the national map. Emma's artwork held a place of honor next to our industry awards, a reminder that creativity and resilience ran in the family. The transformation was complete, but the lessons continued to ripple outward. 3 months ago, I'd given a TEDx talk titled, "The Gift of Betrayal When Your Worst Day Becomes Your Beginning," which had garnered over 1 million views. Women from around the world reached out with their own stories of betrayal and rebuilding, creating an unexpected community of survivors who refused to be victims. Emma, now 11 and wise beyond her years, had started a blog about growing up through family changes, which her school counselor used as a resource for other children dealing with divorce. Noah, 9 and thriving, had become the star of his soccer team, and recently told his coach that his mom was his hero because she showed him that falling down wasn't the end, it was just a chance to get up stronger. Marcus had attempted to reconnect with the children several times, but his inconsistency and broken promises had led them to request reduced contact themselves. The family therapist had supported their decision, noting that children shouldn't be forced to maintain relationships that cause them anxiety. He now saw them once a month for supervised lunch visits, during which he tried too hard to be fun, Dad not understanding that what they'd wanted was simply a present, honest father. His life had settled into a pattern of mediocrity and regret, still living with his mother, still working retail, still paying off debts that seemed to multiply faster than he could manage. He'd tried dating through apps, but his reputation preceded him. One woman had actually messaged me after matching with him, asking if the stories were true. I'd simply sent her the court documents and wished her well. Chloe had disappeared from Denver entirely 6 months ago, moving to a small town in Nebraska, where a high school friend had offered her a fresh start. The last anyone had heard, she was working at a call center and living in a trailer park, a far cry from the luxury apartment with mountain views she'd once flaunted. She'd sent me one final email before leaving, not exactly an apology, but an acknowledgement that she'd destroyed her life for nothing. I didn't respond. Some conversations were better left closed. My parents had sold their family home and downsized to a condo near my studio, wanting to be more involved in their grandchildren's lives. The family dynamics had completely shifted with me at the center now, the quiet daughter who'd become the family's anchor. During Sunday dinners at my house, we didn't mention Chloe, not out of cruelty, but because there was nothing left to say. She'd chosen her path and was walking it alone. The surprise relationship that had developed was with Patricia Marcus's mother, who'd become like a second mother to me. She'd legally removed Marcus from her will, leaving everything to Emma and Noah, in trust, a final acknowledgement of who truly deserved her legacy. We had coffee every Wednesday, discussing books, art, and the children's achievements. She'd even started dating a retired professor she'd met at a gallery opening, proving it was never too late to begin again. My business had evolved beyond simple graphic design into a full creative agency, specializing in helping women-owned businesses build their brands. We'd been featured in Forbes Fast Company and Entrepreneur magazine. The girl who'd once been told she should be grateful for the life her husband provided was now providing careers for other women, some of whom were rebuilding their own lives after similar betrayals. The universe had saved its best surprise for last month. I'd been invited to speak at a conference in Vegas, of all places. The irony wasn't lost on me as I walked past the very chapel where Marcus and Chloe had made their catastrophic decision. I'd actually stopped and taken a photo not out of bitterness, but as a marker of how far I'd come. That chapel had been the setting for their ending, but the catalyst for my beginning. During my presentation, I talked about the power of responding, rather than reacting, how my simple, cool responses had driven Marcus and Chloe crazy while preserving my dignity and sanity. The audience had laughed when I'd shown screenshots of our text exchanges, his increasingly frantic messages met with my calm, single-word replies. But they'd also understood the deeper message. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to give toxic people the emotional response they're seeking. After the conference, I'd received an offer to write a book about my experience. The working title was Cool: A Guide to Strategic Dignity in the Face of Betrayal. The advance was more than Marcus had made in his best year of sales, another small irony in a story full of them. Emma had already designed the cover, a minimalist approach that perfectly captured the essence of quiet strength. The children had grown into remarkable young people, despite, or perhaps because of what they'd witnessed. Emma had recently won a national art competition for middle schoolers, her piece titled Phoenix Mother, showing a woman rising from ashes with 2 children held protectively in her wings. When asked about her inspiration, she'd simply said, "I painted my mom." Noah had developed a protective streak toward his classmates from divorced families, becoming a peer counselor who helped other kids navigate the confusion of changed family dynamics. His teacher had called him an old soul, but I knew better. He'd simply learned early that family wasn't about who shared your DNA, but who showed up consistently with love and support. The financial security I'd built meant the children's college funds were fully funded, something Marcus had always promised but never delivered. They had opportunities he'd talked about, but never provided art camps for Emma's soccer clinics, for Noah family trips, that were about making memories, not impressing clients. We'd spent 2 weeks in Europe over the summer, standing in front of paintings Emma had only seen in books, watching Noah play pickup soccer with kids in Barcelona who didn't speak English but understood the universal language of sport. The deepest satisfaction came from knowing that Marcus and Chloe had to watch our success from afar. Social media meant they could see the studio opening, the conference speeches, the children's achievements, the life that had bloomed in their absence. Every accomplishment was a reminder of what they'd thrown away for a Vegas weekend, and a few months of sneaking around, I'd learned that the opposite of love wasn't hate, it was indifference. And I'd reached that blessed state where Marcus and Chloe were simply characters in my origin story, not active players in my current life. They'd been the earthquake that had seemed devastating at the time, but had actually cleared the ground for something infinitely better to be built. Last week, Emma had asked me if I ever regretted what had happened, if I wished Dad had never betrayed us. I'd thought carefully before answering, wanting to be honest without burdening her with adult complexities. "You know what, sweetheart? I don't regret it. Because if it hadn't happened, we wouldn't have this life. We wouldn't know how strong we are. We wouldn't have learned that we can survive anything together. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us are actually gifts wrapped in really ugly paper." She'd nodded understanding in the way that children who've been through difficulties often do. Like when you break a bone and it grows back stronger. Exactly like that. As I locked up the studio that evening, preparing to head home to make dinner for my children, I reflected on the journey from that Saturday morning to this moment. Marcus had texted that I was pathetic. Chloe had said I was never enough. They'd both been spectacularly wrong. I hadn't just been enough. I'd been more than they could handle, which is why they tried to diminish me. But you can't diminish a mountain by calling it a hill. You can't extinguish a fire by denying its heat. And you can't destroy a woman who's been forged in the fires of betrayal and emerged as steel. My phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Mom, Noah, and I started dinner. It might be a little burnt, but we tried." Also, Grandma Patricia brought dessert and is telling us embarrassing stories about Dad as a kid. Hurry home. I smiled, typing back, on my way, and slightly burnt dinner made with love beats perfect meals made in tension any day. As I drove through Denver's evening traffic toward home, I passed the restaurant where Marcus had proposed all those years ago. It had closed down, replaced by a modern fitness studio, another small metaphor for transformation. The past was gone, paved over by something newer, stronger, better. The radio played a song about starting over, and I turned it up, singing along badly, but with joy. In my rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of myself 35 years old, successful, free, and genuinely happy. The woman looking back at me bore little resemblance to the shell of a person who'd cleaned up broken coffee mug pieces that Saturday morning while her world exploded via text message. That woman had been sleeping, going through the motions of a life that looked good from the outside, but was hollow within. It had taken betrayal to wake her up, to show her that she'd been accepting crumbs when she deserved a feast. Marcus and Chloe had thought they were the main characters in a story about finding true love. Instead, they'd been supporting players in my story of finding myself. As I pulled into my driveway, I saw Emma and Noah watching from the window, waving enthusiastically. Patricia stood behind them holding what looked like a homemade pie. This was my family, chosen and biological, bound by love rather than obligation, strengthened by trials rather than broken by them. Before getting out of the car, I pulled out my phone and did something I'd been considering for months. I deleted Marcus's contact information, removing the last trace of him from my daily life. He didn't deserve even that small space in my phone's memory. Then, for good measure, I deleted the screenshots of all our text exchanges, the evidence of his betrayal, the documentation of his downfall. I didn't need them anymore. The past had served its purpose and could now be released. As I walked toward my front door, toward the laughter and warmth waiting inside, I felt the last chains of that old life fall away. Marcus and Chloe had given me an unwitting gift, the destruction necessary for transformation. They'd thought they were ending my story, but they'd actually just been the prologue to something so much better. The door opened before I reached it, Noah rushing out to hug me, while Emma called out that she'd saved the dinner from complete disaster. Patricia smiled from the doorway, holding up the pie like a trophy. This was my life now, imperfect, chaotic, real, and absolutely beautiful. And as for Marcus and Chloe, well, I hoped they'd eventually find their own peace, their own redemption, their own path forward. But that was their journey to make, their consequences to navigate. My journey had led me here, to this moment, to this life I'd built from the ashes of betrayal. Turns out the best revenge really was a life well lived, and mine was just getting started. So to anyone watching this who's been betrayed, who's been told they're not enough, who's been left for someone supposedly better, remember that sometimes the person leaving is doing you the biggest favor of your life. They're clearing the way for you to become who you were always meant to be. Your betrayal might be your beginning. Your worst day might be your first day. And sometimes the most powerful response to someone trying to destroy you is a simple, devastating, cool. Thank you for watching my story. Have you ever had someone underestimate your strength? How did you prove them wrong? Let me know in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of triumph over betrayal. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they're stronger than they know. Remember, you're not pathetic, you're powerful. You're not broken, you're becoming. Thank you for being part of this journey with me, and may you find your own path from betrayal to breakthrough.